just a plain X like this one would be like Mexico. Mexico. She, can you say it? She. Mexico. Whereas this one here is a little different. It's got a cap over the top. So that's h, like la, h. And this one here is only used by Haidas. There's no other language that, at least I've never heard of one, that makes this sound here, but it's way down here. Haida, it's an H sound. Y is just like Y and anything else, like in yard, but yan, that's a word for fog or for cloud. There's
was yawning.
Yeah, not yawning. No, there's that's a fog monster. If you're out there on the ocean and it gets foggy, Yanamagan is a real noisy swimmer. It's a very large sea monster type, I guess you'd call it. And if you ever hear it, head for land, because if you see it, it'll get you. You can't get away from it. So I've seen a couple of things. I don't know, but I think they call that one Chan's Hanwai. Chan's Hanwai is a monster in shallow water.
Can you spell it? I like monsters.
I can spell it.
It? That's a clown. What the sea monster?
Chan's Hanwai. The word for beach, Chow Sali. So this refers to the shallow water near the beach. Chan's Hanwai. There's a place on the south end of Prince of Wales Island called Cape Shacken. It's about 30 miles across, maybe a little farther from Masset to Cape Shacken, in Kun. And it's said that there's a cave under there from the time of the ice where this being lived under there. And my dad was telling me they were traveling one time. It was just getting dark, and the boat was ahead of him, a guy named John Lawrence. And John called my dad on the radio and he said, Woodrow, he said, watch out, there's something coming, looks like a big wave. So Dad slowed down, and Dad could see this thing. The boat ahead of him was about a 40-footer, maybe a little bit smaller. And Dad could see this dark, all the thing, and then it went back down. And it wasn't a wave, but it was this one here, Chan's Hanwai, that they see it from time to time, but I've never seen it. I know my cousin and his dad saw it, but so anyway.
Is that shallow sea monster?
Shallow water. It's it's a spirit in the shallow water.
Okay.
And the other one is in fact, there was a village called Yan, I think. That's where the Raven people come from. Yaplanas, from the village of Yan. So I guess it's a foggy town. I don't know how the people were foggy.
Yaklana?
Yaplanas. Y-A-K-W. Llanas, those are the ravens. Not all of the ravens come from there, though, I don't think. I don't know, that's their side of the story. Ours is from the eagle side, and I'll write it down so you can Google it.
So is it the Eagle clan?
Yeah. Our crest, the two-headed eagle, were called Tlana. Tlana. And this is this bird here, the Pacific golden plover. Google it, and you'll see what an amazing bird it is. It only stands about this tall. There are two flyways. About in March, they start getting ready to leave New Zealand. And they fly straight up, huge flocks of them, go way up until they're just about out of sight. Then they come back down until they're about height to the ceiling. Then they pull up and they go up and they do it again and again and again. They keep doing flying straight up. It takes a great deal of power to do it. And they do this for about 2 weeks or longer to get ready for where they're going. And so one flyway leaves New Zealand and goes along the coast of Asia and then goes up into Siberia to nest and have their young. And the other flyway comes across the Pacific, across Fiji, Tonga, the Hawaiian Islands, until it makes landfall around Haida. Then it goes up into the Arctic and Alaska where they have their young. In the fall time, they fly all the way back to New Zealand. So I don't know how many thousand miles that is round trip, but it is a small bird. And today's the day we're supposed to tell a story, so I'll tell the story of why we adopted that plan. But anyway, so the last one on there is the YA with a pinch. Yeah. One of the stories tells about raven tricking Haw'aa when they're fishing. It says, stick out your tongue, so raven grabbed and cut his tongue off. And they had a bunch of halibut in the boat that Haw'aa had caught. Raven didn't catch any. And Raven didn't want this person to tell that he caught him. So all Haw'aa could say was, yuck, 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 yuck. He couldn't speak, so that's the way he makes sounds now. You see that duck down there around Falls Creek? It stands about this tall. It's a merganser diving duck. Or we call it Haw'aa in Haida. Anyway, this is, that goes through the whole alphabet, and you need to practice these sounds because they're not the same as English. And what I wanted you to do too is to fill these out for yourselves so you can learn how to say your name. Somebody's a blank sheet. So anyway, that first one on there is
Yeah. Anybody need next door? You guys have some?
So you put your name first. If you have a Haida name, we'll see if we can help you learn to spell it. But this is when you identify yourself, like my name is Kaunsama. That's not my name, that's how I'm called. The name is just a label, it doesn't mean anything. So these two like Sinu, it's Hinu. Hinu di Kya'an. Let me hear you say it. Hinu di Kya'an. Kya'an. There's a rhythm to it. Kya'an. It's 2 syllables.
Hinu di Kya'an.
Hinu di Kya'an. Kaan sanga hinu di Kya'an. If I say to you, Sinudam Kya'an, how are you called? Sinudam Kya'an or Kaan sanga hinu di Kya'an. So that's the first part in there. Is how you write that down and you might remember how to say it. Hinu di Kya'an. Hinu di Kya'an. And then the second part, again, this is different from Masset. Our word for eagle is tz'ak. Tz'ak. Where that word came from is 5 cycles ago, 26,000 years ago, we had climate change like we do now. And that's when we got the Ice Age. But before the ice came, there was one called Namkolsas. Namkolsas is the black-skinned one. It was a giant bird, black bird, that the wingspan was somewhere around, well, in English it would be 4 fathoms, about 26 feet, 24, 25 feet across. This giant black bird, and in one of the bays near one of our villages, there's a petroglyph on a rock outcropping. So I took a picture of it and I showed it to my dad's older brother, and he looked at it and he said, that's a giant black eagle that lived in the high places and hasn't been seen for many generations. I had a friend in Arizona, a Hopi prophet named Thomas Pinyaka. I showed him the pictures and he said the same thing. That's a giant black eagle that lived in the high places and hasn't been seen for many generations. And I think it was a giant condor because...
I know what it was.
Huh?
Pterodactyl.
Well, pterodactyl had leathery wings. Well, I don't remember much about those. I was pretty young at the time.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Namkolsas was the one that lived in the high mountains, and when the ice came, it disappeared. And so they have the giant condors in the Andes Mountains in South America. But paleontologists have never found any ancient bones from these birds. So I'm convinced that that's where they came from.
How do you pronounce the last word? No, call.
That's just a black-skinned one. And the way this one came about is when the ice came, some people left and went south. And the people on the west coast of Vancouver Island, up as far up as Bella Bella, and then going down the coast, we call the people Kituyas. Kituyas are the descendants of the ones who didn't leave when the ice came. So they stayed here, probably been here somewhere between 50 and 30,000 years, I don't know how long. But they stayed. And the Coast Salish and the others that left and went south, we call them the eagle people. Because when they came back from the south, this bald eagle came with them. And we didn't have any on our islands until much later. So we borrowed that Dene word. It's actually from the Athabascan family of languages that's spoken by the Navajos, the Apaches, spoken all the way up to Tlingit and then up into Alaska. So this is the word we use as talk. Talk is that bald eagle. And the young one, that's the immature one is the word that Massets use. Could. We use talk and they use could. And so anyway, that's where we got that word talk was from the Dene speaking peoples. And so when you get to the second part there, where it says moiety, eagle, or raven, so you're either, sometimes it's just pronounced Haw'aa, but it's more than just the H. It's Haw'aa. It's with that X, that Mexico X, Haw'aa. And so if you're from the Raven side, it'll be, but in Alaska we use the Tlingit word, Yah. So I would be Gatsakas Kudik Gusudik Olag Gust Udik Olag. So I'm from the eagle side. Here in Alaska, they would say Gusu Yalai or Gayalai Gusu Dik Olagun. Gayala. Whereas in Mass, I think that Haw'aa Gusu Dik Olagun. I have to check on that one.
What is Haw'aa?
Huh?
What does Haw'aa mean?
Haw'aa is raven. You've seen that on the Haw'aa when they're dancing. That's the way we pronounce our word for raven. When they do that dance, Haw'aa, you know, everybody.
Yeah.
Well, see, if you're going to dance like raven, you have to learn to walk like raven. See, this way raven walks. You got no hips. See, you learn all kinds of.
So that Haw'aa comes from Masset?
No, Haw'aa is what we all use.
All of us? Okay.
And but on the Alaska side, we borrowed this from the Tlingit people. It's Dene-speaking people. Yash, they call it Yesh. Yesh, and we call it Yash.
Okay.
So,
Yesh or
but
Yash.
anyway, that's where that word
That's
comes
Raven?
from. Yeah.
So like in Heidelberg?
Uh-huh. You know, Raven is one that never minds his own business. One day Eagle was sitting in a tree, just, you know, moving around, minding its own business, very regal bird. And here comes Chicken Hawk. Landed in a tree above Eagle. Says, "How you doing, brother?" "I'm not your brother." "Yeah, we're related. Look, I got eyes I can see as good as you can. I got a beak like yours. I got talons. We're related." "I'll go bother some other bird." Chicken Hawk was hot-tempered. He jumped on Eagle's back and there, starting Eagle's trying to get him up. And here comes Raven. Land over his Hey, Eagle, what's that chicken hawk doing on your back? He says, mind your own business. This is a family fight. So, you gotta laugh once in a while. Smile, it don't hurt. Gee,
Chicken hawk.
I'm gonna have to make me one of those pacifiers. So anyway, and then the second one, number 3, is really your crest. My crest is a 2-headed eagle, which we call Tetlana. Tetlana, and Todd is Cheech Gitney. Cheech is a small harbor porpoise, and you're Toyota?
Cannisley, I think.
Oh,
I don't remember how you say it. Cannisley?
what's the,
Starhouse.
what?
Starhouse.
Star House, okay. Gee, there's not too many eagles. I think Massett was the only one that had Star House.
That's your clan? Starhouse?
Yeah.
Here's the workers for Star. It's Aithanai would be your house. See, this is in English part of it, and then the rest are, excuse me, quiet. And so anyway, this crest, the Tetlanas, the way we got ours, there's different versions of it in Massett. They call it I think it's a tree. And we call it and the word Lana is a village, but it's also the center of the world. What this meant by that is when the wind comes from the north, it comes right here to my village. When it comes from the south, it comes right here. When it comes from the west, it comes right here. When it comes from the east, it comes right here. So this is where all the winds meet. So that's the center of the world, Lana. And so our crest names come from historic events or from historic places. And the way we got our 2-headed crest was 2 brothers had been away to another village visiting for something. And when they came home, the older brother was the house chief. And as he went in the door, his Nat Yaakov, his true nephew, the one who inherited from him, had died. And his body was laying out there. And he was so upset by it, he went outside. He was going to walk on the beach. He ducked through the door. And when he looked up on the tree branch were 2 eagles. One was facing one way, the other one facing the opposite direction. It looked like one eagle with 2 heads. So that was to commemorate his nephew's death. They adopted that 2-headed eagle as our crest. And we come from a place called East Lamai. East Lamai, East is just a big rock sticking out of the ground or out of the ocean. Well, Langara Island, when we first moved back there, was just a big rock sticking out. Lamai is like a big campus before a village. But anyway, in the spring months, our canoes would go out 2 days out into the Gulf of Alaska. and there's ocean current going south. It's called the Japanese current. Goes south, and there's another one coming north, which is called the Humboldt current. And they would get in that Japanese current one and start drifting south, and then they would hear the first eels coming north in the Humboldt current. So they would move over into that one and take as many seals as they wanted, then they would go home. But while they're waiting, this huge flocks of thousands and thousands of these birds would come flying from the west, from the open ocean. And so it was assumed they were seabirds, because there's no land out there. And this went on for a very long period of time. And then I think one fall, there were 4 guys on a kutlu. Kutlu is a small canoe, it's a hunting canoe. Kut is, oh, okay. That's a star house, yeah. Okay.
That's by the name of,
Who does it say? Oh, that's Anu Salih.
yeah.
Cod people. Oh, Can. It's a small Pacific cod. Can. But anyway, these 4 guys were out there, they were jigging for black cod. And a southeaster came up. And it came up too fast for them to make it to shore. So they had to ride with the waves. And the waves were huge. And there were times when they were afraid they were going to swamp. And they have a thing called a hutu. It's a bailer. And one guy would bail and the other 3 were controlling the canoe. And this went on for many days. And then toward late afternoon, they could hear some breakers in the distance, and they knew if they got in there, they were dead. So the 4 of them were at their paddles, and then they saw this huge rock looming out of the ocean. So they got around on this leeward side out of the wind and got ashore on this big rock. And on the canoe, they always carried the bark from the Douglas fir tree. And sometimes they have a box inside the canoe filled with sand so they could build fire in there. And they would use that bark from the Douglas fir because it burned like coal. But anyway, they got ashore and they got out of the wind and pulled their canoe up and then laid on its side to make a shelter. And so they built fire and they cooked some for themselves. And the weather was letting up, but it was still pretty tough, big seas out there. And they saw these huge sea mammals come up out of the water. They were kind of gray colored. I think it is probably the now extinct sea cow that the Europeans slaughtered and killed all of them. But they're much, much bigger than a sea lion or walrus. But anyway, they climbed up on the rocks to get out of to warm up or something, I don't know. And they moved very slow, so these men were able to kill one of them. And they skinned it, and they kept the fire going with that bark, but they took the mussel shells. There was lots of mussel shells, and they used that to smoke the meat so that it wouldn't spoil right away. I don't know how much they smoked it, but anyway, they laid out that big skin. And then about the width of a big man's thumb, they start in the center and they cut in a spiral until they cut the whole skin. And then they straighten it out and put rocks on it, because later they turn it, make it into a long rope. And anyway, one day when the weather finally eased up enough the way they figured they could make it home. See, when you live on the ocean, you always know where you come from. You got a sense of it. Some of you may do that even now. You know which direction from here your village is. So when they started home, they had a pretty good idea of where home was. But here come those birds they'd seen in the springtime flying over. There's huge flocks of them heading south. and they knew that they would pass right over the village. And so one of them came fluttering down, landing in the water. So they pulled alongside, and the guy used a paddle and picked it up out of the water and set it in a canoe. And they put water there. Then they saw its feet. It didn't have webbed feet. So they knew it was a land bird and not a seabird. And so they were able to follow those birds, and it got them right home. So they adopted that. Later, I asked my dad's older brother, he lived to be 101, about this word. I said, why do they call it tek? And he laughed and he said, we call it Eskimo bird. I said, why do you call it Eskimo bird? He says, because they go so far north. And so anyway, this became the name of our village, Strathcona. And so that's where our crest came from, that village of Tet. So we're called Strathclonas, and our crest is the eagle with two heads. I haven't heard the massive version of it, but they call themselves Todd. And we don't just call ourselves Tet. We use the whole name, Strathcona. And that refers to males and the females. Janas, Janas, that's the woman of the village of Janas. So each one of them, the two fin killer whales, that was my father, and also my father was chief of the brown bear house. And there's a story of how we got to the brown bear. But the two fin killer whale is a fairly recent, it's only a couple hundred years old. In the spring, the Russians would come to the village and they'd pick up haidas to go hunting fur seals. And that one year this man told his wife, I got a feeling I might not come back this time. So he told her, if anything happens to me, I'll come back as Hans Elterstun. I'll come back as an orca with two dorsal fins. So when the hunters returned, he wasn't with them. And his wife and all the family all grieved for him. And then one day, a pod of killer whales came through the channel in front of the village, and there was that one with the two dorsal fins. I've seen it twice. When my dad's younger brother died, the killer whales came into the channel, and there was that big one with two dorsal fins. And when my dad's nephew drowned, the two-fin killer whale came in again. But anyway, so that's the one that they adopted. It's from the Raven side. There's a shark house. My grandmother grew up in a shark house, my dad's mother. And his uncle was chief of the brown bear house, and another one was chief of the shark house, and one of the two-fin killer whales. So my dad's brother was chief of the brown bear house, and he passed it to my dad. Then just before my dad died, he passed it to his nephew, his oldest sister's son. So Coots is our word for brown bear. Coots, X-U-U-T, Coot, Coots. It's different from a grizzly bear. The grizzly bear is smaller. The grizzly bear has very long claws because it digs. It eats grubs, worms, and whatever, tears up old logs. Brown bear will eat salmon, and they'll kill deer and whatever. So anyway, so when you fill that out, find out what your see, the word with clan is, there's two different words. One up there and number 2 says moiety. Moiety is a French word meaning divided into two parts. And so the two parts are eagle and raven. When I was a kid, we knew which ones we were, which ones we were from. And in the morning, there at elementary school, every morning, we'd start with the Lord's Prayer. And the teacher was listening, and something didn't sound right. So the teacher moved over the next day a little bit farther over, because everybody stood in the same place every time. And heard it again. Something was not quite right. And finally got to it, and there was one girl had it was like this, and she was praying fervently. Lead us not into temptation and deliver us from eagles. Not quite right. So I guess we were the evil ones. So you want to take a break and go and stretch. Don't